If there's one thing we all carry, even when we pretend everything's fine, it's that pang of insecurity that appears at the most inconvenient moments. It arises when you need to make an important decision, when someone's silence seems to say more than it should, or when life simply asks you for courage on a day when you just wanted to rest. And yet, there's a detail that almost no one mentions. That same feeling you try to hide can become your greatest silent strength, if you learn to look at it with discernment, simplicity, and a little Stoic philosophy. Imagine, for a moment, walking with more clarity, feeling that your emotions are not a constant whirlwind, but something you can observe and understand with a certain autonomy. It's not about becoming a cold or perfect person. It's about discovering that there is an inner space where freedom begins, and that you may never have truly explored. In that space, your capacity to act with more resilience is born, even when the world tries to pull you into chaos. What if I told you that the ancient Stoics faced the same anxieties as you? Fear of the future, pressure from others, self-doubt, and found simple yet powerful ways to transform all of that into purpose. That's right. And today, you'll access those tools without having to become a philosopher or memorize Latin phrases. Prepare to discover how small inner shifts completely change your outlook on life. It's not magic. It's not shallow self-help. It's a path to emotional freedom that begins with an almost imperceptible step, but one that transforms everything around it. Listening more and reacting less is almost a hidden superpower in everyday life. When you start paying attention to what's implied, to what you feel, what you think, and what really matters, a form of emotional autonomy is born that diminishes the subtle noise of insecurity. It's like adjusting the internal volume. Instead of letting the world scream inside you, you learn to filter what deserves attention. This inner mastery doesn't come all at once. It reveals itself in small choices, like not responding impulsively or not allowing a hurtful opinion to define your day. Clarity grows when you realize that listening isn't about submitting, but about positioning yourself intelligently. And in this process, life becomes a little lighter because you finally understand that not everything requires a reaction. Some things only ask for discernment. Interpreting what's happening around you better is also a practice that strengthens that inner center that so many people neglect. When you observe facts with more simplicity, you reduce exaggerations that fuel anxiety and indecision. It's almost like cleaning a foggy lens. Suddenly, what seemed gigantic loses its frightening size. Resilience arises when you separate what is real from what is distorted interpretation due to haste or fear. This process is profoundly liberating because it teaches you not to lend your peace of mind to the first harsh comment or misunderstood gesture. With each conscious choice, you reaffirm your freedom not to be guided by the gaze of others. And, little by little, you realize that this inner mastery isn't about controlling the world, but about not letting the world control you. Humility comes into play when you recognize that not everything needs external validation and that your emotions can be managed with more serenity. Imagine starting the day already knowing that your peace is not for sale. This purpose-driven attitude drastically reduces the power that insecurity has to dictate your actions. It's almost poetic. When you learn to be silent inside, even problems diminish in intensity. And this small inner revolution opens doors to what comes next, where courage will be invited to enter in an even deeper way. The truth is that fear often disguises itself as prudence, when most of the time it's just trying to protect old insecurities. And that's precisely where courage comes in as a silent ally. It doesn't eliminate fear, it just gives you the discernment to walk alongside it. When you accept the worst-case scenario, something peculiar happens. Anxiety loses its power. This doesn't mean it becomes easy, but it becomes simpler to understand that failure doesn't destroy anyone. What destroys is paralysis. And when you face this with humility, you discover that daring is not irresponsibility, it's freedom. It's like taking a step in the dark, trusting that even if you stumble, you learn something valuable. Viewing failure as part of the journey completely transforms your relationship with life. Think of books that change trajectories like Mindset by Carol Dweck or The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Both show that resilience is born precisely when you realize that falling is a demanding, yet fair, teacher. Adopting this attitude is almost like opening an inner clearing. You gain clarity about who you are and what really matters. And when the mind understands that making mistakes doesn't define anyone, it only educates, insecurity loses that tone of constant threat. It is in this space that purpose is born, not as a grandiose goal, but as a daily choice to keep trying. Walking even in the face of uncertainty is an art, and like all art, it requires practice. Start by confronting small fears, saying something you avoid, admitting a mistake, finishing a stalled project, saying no when necessary. These are simple gestures that strengthen emotional autonomy. Over time, you realize that each calculated risk returns a piece of your own strength. And so, step by step, your perspective changes. What once seemed impossible now only seems laborious. Life doesn't get easier, you just become more robust inside. And this strength opens space for another essential movement, where simplicity and clarity begin to shape the path in an unexpected way. Modern life is so full of distractions that, without realizing it, you end up carrying too much weight. Expectations that aren't yours, opinions you didn't ask for, commitments that only fuel insecurity. Simplicity acts as a kind of internal filter that separates what matters from what only takes up space. When you let go of excess, material, mental, or emotional, something very interesting happens. Clarity begins to emerge almost on its own. It's not about having little, but about not being dominated by everything that doesn't contribute to your purpose. This movement reduces internal noise and restores a feeling of freedom you may not even remember you had. And, curiously, the world becomes easier to interpret when there is less turmoil within you. Practicing simplicity can begin with very concrete gestures. Getting rid of objects you keep for the sake of checking them out. Limiting time on social media, organizing the space where you work or read. Books like The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo or Less is More by Francine J. show how the environment directly influences emotional state. When you eliminate external excess, you also reduce internal excess, and emotional autonomy grows. Thoughts become lighter, the body seems to breathe better, and even resilience increases because you stop feeling overwhelmed by an avalanche of stimuli. Simplicity restores focus. Clarity restores discernment. And it's interesting to see how simplicity also brings a healthy dose of humility. It reminds you that you don't need to prove anything to anyone, that life doesn't demand perfection, but presence. With each layer of excess removed, you get closer to your natural strength, the one that doesn't shout but sustains. The courage to simplify frees up energy that was previously spent on unnecessary worries. And when that energy is turned towards what truly matters, freedom becomes a consequence, not an effort. This state of mind opens the way to something even deeper, continuous learning without pride interfering. There's a special serenity in admitting that we don't know everything, and that this is perfectly normal. Humility doesn't diminish anyone. It opens space for discernment because it removes the burden of perfection and silences the insecurity that insists on comparing your path to others. When you accept that there's always something new to learn, the ego relaxes and the heart listens better. This state promotes clarity about who you are and what you can still become. And the most interesting thing is that this attitude doesn't weaken you. On the contrary, it gives you the emotional autonomy to deal with criticism and challenges without losing your center. Thus, little by little, learning ceases to be an obligation and becomes a choice. Discovering new perspectives can begin with very simple steps, such as reading books outside your comfort zone. Try titles like The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg or Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Each offers a different way of seeing the world and strengthening your resilience. Continuous learning acts as a bridge that takes you from a limited state to a broader one, where the fear of making mistakes loses its power. And when you commit to it, your purpose naturally improves without excessive pressure. Life becomes more nuanced, more colorful, with more freedom of interpretation. Insecurity diminishes because knowledge equips you with understanding, not pride. And the more you learn, the more you understand that no one evolves alone. This awareness brings a beautiful simplicity. You realize that you can listen, absorb, test, fail, adjust, and all of this is part of the process. Constant learning teaches you to have the courage to admit failures, but also to celebrate small progress. Humility doesn't put you down. It puts you at the exact point where growth is possible. And when you realize this, a new horizon opens up, preparing the ground for another important reflection, where you place your value and what truly sustains your inner strength. It's curious how society has taught us to measure value by what is visible: material achievements, status, public praise. But when you look inward with more discernment, you realize that none of that sustains the peace you truly seek. True strength is born from your inner wealth, the kind that doesn't depend on applause or external expectations. When you base your identity solely on what is fragile and external, insecurity gains ground. A single criticism or loss is enough to make everything crumble. But when value comes from within, emotional freedom grows and life takes on a different texture. It's like exchanging a heavy mask for a light face. And this lightness is what opens space for greater clarity and authenticity. Recognizing the danger of excessive expectations is a daily exercise in simplicity. You begin by asking yourself, is what I'm seeking mine, or is it society's? And this simple question has the power to reorganize priorities. Books like The Richest Man in Babylon or The Courage to Be Imperfect show how focusing on the essentials produces a solid sense of resilience. Inner wealth is strengthened when you choose what truly matters, without being guided by the fleeting brilliance of appearances. And then purpose emerges almost spontaneously, as if it had always been there, just waiting for space. Interestingly, the more you cultivate this inner value, the less you need to prove anything to the world. This understanding also brings a beautiful dose of humility, because it reminds you that we are all on this same journey, trying to balance what we want with what is expected of us. And when you face life from this angle, courage becomes a consequence. The courage to be real, to be simple, to be yourself. Emotional autonomy grows when you realize you don't need a showcase to validate your existence. Insecurity diminishes because your value is no longer exposed to every external wind. And this silent security prepares the ground for the next step, understanding the impact of the relationships you choose and the reactions you allow within yourself. Choosing the right people to walk beside you is one of the most profound acts of emotional autonomy. It's not about creating elitist relationships, but about recognizing that some presences strengthen you while others drain your energy without you realizing it. When you begin to look at this with discernment, you notice that certain conversations uplift you, while others only increase your insecurity. And as Stoicism teaches us, not everything deserves a response. Not every conflict requires your participation. Conscious silence is often worth more than the best argument. And this kind of posture, when practiced with humility, brings a silent sense of freedom that keeps you grounded. The truth is that reacting compulsively almost always fuels unnecessary problems. When you choose to respond clearly instead of impulsively, you transform entire situations. Emotional resilience emerges when you realize you're not obligated to absorb everything that comes your way. A malicious criticism, a snide comment, an empty provocation. All of these only have power if you surrender yours. It's worth remembering Epictetus' advice. It is not things that affect us, but the opinion we have of them. This simple yet profound perspective reduces internal turmoil and puts control back in your hands, reinforcing your purpose of maintaining inner peace. And when you cultivate relationships that strengthen you, life takes on a lighter glow. People who encourage you, who truly listen to you, who celebrate your growth. These friendships fuel daily courage. They lessen the feeling of isolation and weaken that whispered insecurity that tries to convince you that you are alone on the journey. Similarly, learning not to react to everything gives you the simplicity needed to walk with less weight. This balance between healthy connections and conscious reactions builds a silent inner strength, opening space to see more deeply the great reminder that follows. Life is fleeting, and precisely for that reason, it deserves to be lived with presence and commitment. There's a surprising power in remembering that everything passes, including ourselves. This awareness, far from being gloomy, restores clarity about what truly deserves attention. When you understand that time is limited, insecurity loses much of its allure, because it thrives on a future you cannot control. Stoic philosophy has always taught us to look at mortality with humility, not fear, as if to say, do the best with what you have while you can. This perception doesn't paralyze you. On the contrary, it gives you the autonomy to choose what matters and abandon what only occupies emotional space. is a silent reminder that life is finite, and that's what makes it valuable. Surrendering to what cannot be controlled is an act of emotional freedom that few practice. Most fight against the inevitable, and it is from this resistance that much of anxiety is born. When you learn to focus only on what truly depends on your actions, you gain discernment to live more peacefully. This doesn't mean passivity, but wisdom. Books like Death is a Day Worth Living by Ana Claudia Quintana Arendt show how this perspective transforms priorities. And when the focus shifts, resilience grows naturally because you don't waste energy trying to control storms that don't respond to your command. Life flows with more simplicity. Accepting uncertainty as part of the journey creates space for a different kind of courage. A quiet courage, born from the understanding that guarantees are impossible, but purpose is always possible. It's a courage that silences insecurity, not because it eliminates the unknown, but because it welcomes its presence without panic. When you begin to live like this, each moment becomes more intense, more present, more real. Humility puts you in your place in the world. Courage gives you back direction. Simplicity keeps you light. And it is precisely this combination that prepares the ground for the conclusion of the journey. To act, to transform, and to move forward consciously. Ultimately, this entire journey, from inner mastery to surrendering to the uncontrollable, points to a simple yet powerful question. What will you do with what you've learned? You don't need to transform your entire life at once. Just choose one point, one habit, one attitude that you can adjust today. True change is born from the small, the consistent, the possible. And it is precisely there that the silent force begins to take shape. Ask yourself, what can I simplify right now to breathe easier? What fear is still dictating the pace of my steps? Which relationships truly strengthen me? Where am I giving my value to opinions that don't deserve so much space? What can I let go of today that only fuels my insecurity? And most importantly, who do I want to become from now on? You don't need perfection, you need presence. You need clarity to see the next step, courage to take it, and resilience to keep walking, even when the world is in turmoil. And if these reflections have touched you in any way, remember, transformation doesn't come from what we know, but from what we put into practice. Start small, but start today. If this content inspired you, helped you reflect, or brought some relief to your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow more insights like this. You are not alone on this journey, and there is still much to explore together.